I think that was one of my comments, the cost. Okay. Moving forward. Agenda item 6E, discussion and possible action, including requesting the treasurer tax collector to include a high-speed internet and cell coverage checkbox survey on the next property tax bills, and County GIS to plot results on map. Supervisor Williams, you are the sponsor. Please introduce the item.
Some faulty broadband mapping many years ago has impeded our ability to get grant funds and move forward with broadband deployment. And a number of attempts of surveying the public have taken place. We still have very sparse data. This is an attempt to collect the necessary data at a very little cost to the county. Most of the cost here is in the mailing. The tax collector is already mailing property tax bills. I spoke to her last week about including a 1/3 page optional survey, and she agreed that the existing postage would cover that, and estimated, based on a past 3rd page, the cost to be about $800. To be conservative, she suggested she can't imagine it being more than $2,000. If we got even 10% of those surveys back, it would give us what we need to plot cell coverage and broadband coverage countywide, which would save us in a whole lot of other areas and allow us to make next steps in requesting grant funds. It would also allow us to show that some of the carrier mapping is inaccurate.
Okay. Questions? Seeing none. We'll go to public comment. Anyone that would like to comment on this item, please come forward. Seeing no one, it is back to the board. My comment, and it's been quite a while ago, and perhaps Supervisor McCowan will remember, or other staff, we did do some type of survey or comments on the back of an envelope a number of years ago, and received some really bad feedback about doing so and mailing our property tax bills. I don't know if Supervisor McCowan remembers that or exactly what it was. I don't remember precisely, but Supervisor Haschek?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I had a discussion with people working on the broadband issue, and if we got 10% response, their feeling is that it wouldn't be indicative of much because of the way that broadband coverage goes in our county, and that you can have it within the same block, coverage or non-coverage. And so just like the industry has done, that they've said, oh, well, we've got coverage on that block because we have one person saying they've got coverage, and so that means everyone's got coverage. And so my understanding is that, without a real comprehensive evaluation of it, it's not that useful for the work that we need to do in getting broadband coverage.
Supervisor Williams?
I somewhat agree with those statements, but for $1,000, it would give us the best data to date. And I don't see another option other than going door to door and doing the checks, which we financially we couldn't afford. This would get us as close to the data we need at a very low cost. Maybe you have another idea as a competing option.
Supervisor Jurdy?
I've got something to add on the idea of the insert in the treasurer's office, because I actually talked to the treasurer about a different subject to be inserted, but I want to go to that when we've more or less wrapped up discussion on this internet service survey.
Supervisor Williams?
Can I preemptively ask for clarification? Would it be an additional survey or something that we could combine? Because we certainly don't need that full third page for the broadband.
So the issue I brought with the treasurer months ago had to do with our ad hoc committee on fire emergency access, and the question was, could we have an insert? And she said yes, about alerting people to the new Fire Safe Council website that would give information about your neighborhood fire safe district, community, and So that was the intent, was to get that information out now that that website's been revamped by the Resource Conservation District, hosting the Fire Safe Council. And then the other idea was, I think it'd be good every alternating property tax bills would be to provide people with a pie chart that shows them where their property tax dollars go. Most people, because they write the check to the county, they think the county gets the lion's share of the money. Actually, it's not the case. Over half of it goes to the schools. So a simple pie chart that would show people where their property tax dollars goes would be, I think, helpful to the property tax payers in the county.
Supervisor Williams?
I know time is of the essence. We only have, the bills go out in a few weeks to the printer. But I think there would be adequate room that we could combine Supervisor Jury's Fire Safe Council idea with the survey, use the same piece of paper.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor?
If you'd
County
like one.
Council wants to be heard.
And again, I mean, we keep adding things into our agenda items that are not announced to the public. The public has no ability to comment on it. I am concerned because I keep seeing this happen over and over, that our conversations are getting very broad around sort of, I think because the topic is a bit vague at some points. So that's my comment.
Supervisor McCowan?
I think we've been told that some of the ideas we're discussing wouldn't appropriately fit into a motion. So I wonder if we might refer this to general government, where they could start up with the whole raft of ideas. I think it could happen in one meeting. So if general government meets this month, potentially they can come up with the language.
Supervisor Williams?
The tax collector has advised me that she needs this by end of week if we want to move forward this cycle. You want me to, do you want a motion?
So what I'm hearing, though, is we have other suggestions for inserts, and, but that's beyond the agenda item we're looking at today, and the public would not have a chance to comment. So I think what you have said, Supervisor Jurdy, is great, but I also hear that we have a deadline on this particular item in order to meet the deadlines for the treasurer tax collector. So I will entertain a motion, and we need to keep it. Ms. Rao.
Madam Chair, I did have a brief opportunity to speak with our treasurer tax collector about this item. I do also believe that she corresponded briefly with Supervisor Williams. What isn't clear is who will manage and what will become of the results. The treasurer tax collector will not, in her capacity, be tallying, so to speak, the results of this survey. So that
good
was
point.
definitely an outstanding question.
Good point. We're going to go back to Supervisor Williams.
I think that was covered in the recommended action, that it would be County GIS that would plot the results. So may I make a motion?
Hang on. Ms. Rao, response?
Again, so with that, I do believe that there will be some workload analysis that will be done, and there is a cost associated with that. So I do want to make sure that the board keeps that in their minds when they consider an action.
Supervisor McCowan?
Well, do we know that County GIS has the capacity to plot the results on a map?
We do. That was confirmed earlier this year.
Okay.
And sorry.
Well, I mean, it's always, what else would they not be doing, or, you know?
My concern is the cost and the manpower. We keep adding to agendas. Then we get frustrated when information does not come back. You know, it's difficult. Supervisor McCowan?
Well, and a lot of work was done with the Broadband Alliance to do ground truthing. There was a tremendous effort put into that, and which did confirm that the existing maps were completely bogus, that the coverage claimed by the big telecom carriers and by the CPUC were not accurate. So I'm wondering, and given that this is not really a scientific survey, you know, the validity of it is in question. How much of a need, could you please state again the need for this, given the previous ground truthing that was done, and how would this information be used to move us forward?
Yes, and you're absolutely correct. And the trigger was Little Potter Valley in applying for grant funding, USDA funding for rural development. And their grant application was turned down in Washington, D.C. because the valley was told, the Potter Valley Youth and Community Center, they were told that they already had coverage. So why should they give them a grant funding? And about that time, a good friend of mine became the state director for USDA Rural Development, and I called her and said, what the heck? And that's when she went back and found out exactly what was happening for all these grant fundings. The map that was being used was put together by telecom companies, utilities, whatever, that would be carrying such coverage. And they were absolutely false. And I am aware through NACO news coverage that Federal Communications has done a survey, and I can't remember which state. It was either Minnesota or Wisconsin, but one of the states, and used the mapping that was given to them by the telecom companies, and found out that very much of that coverage was faulty. And I know what Supervisor Williams is trying to do here. We are missing out because there is quite a bit of funding that is becoming available at a federal level that can help with all of this. So it's kind of like, how do we do this? How do we find the information needed? But a question for Supervisor Williams, and it was brought up by Supervisor McCowan. Did you look at the mapping that was previously done by the coalition?
I have, and it's a moving target, right? That was a point in time. And in terms of accuracy, one of the problems is polling people online. People who are on dial-up are less likely to participate in a survey about broadband. They may not even see it. And with this property tax mailing option, at least we know every resident is being asked, and their response is not related to the type of connection they may have today. It's completely by paper. But I agree, it may not be completely accurate, it may not be enough data, but I think it would get us a lot closer, and it would give us something credible. We could explain the method that we polled every parcel in the county. We plotted the results, whether that's County GIS or Broadband Alliance. We have a map that shows what we do know. And just looking at that, we'll be able to see where some holes are in the plan. And I think it's important to note this is both about the broadband service and also about the phone service. In emergencies, it would be good to know which communities have poor coverage, because the people may not be able to call. And first responders, who more and more will be relying on AT&T's FirstNet, may not have coverage. So I think it's kind of low-hanging fruit. It's better than not acting.
And I also think another point that needs to be brought up is the fact that we do have cell towers going up that are being placed in areas to give broader coverage and to also give coverage. And I'll give for instance, in Potter Valley, and we call it over the hill at the Eel, but the greater Potter Valley area, a cell tower went in, and it's the first time that they've held cell coverage for emergency services, both at Heartstone Bible Camp and also all the residents, because previous to that, it was a hardline phone. And I do not think that Heartstone even had a hardline phone that went all the way out there with, lines, landlines. So anyway, circumstances change, and maybe some of the mapping that was done happens to be stale at this point. But I do think it's important, and when we think about resiliency during emergencies, whether it's wildfire, earthquake, just medical situation for an individual, you do think about all of this, and perhaps the $2,000 that's somewhat been quoted may be acceptable. I mean, it should be acceptable cost. Supervisor McCowan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, given the minimal cost, the statement that GIS is prepared to plot the results, I would support moving forward with this item. I think additional direction might be for Supervisor Williams to work with the executive office. There should be a brief intro to this is why this is in your tax bill. You know, we're trying to get greater information to provide better service, whatever you want to come up to as an intro to the questions that would then appear. And as we know, that wouldn't take more than a half a page. I think it'd be up to the executive office if they wanted to approve using the other half of that page for some other logical suggestion. That could be done administratively.
So you're not wasting space. So you're not wasting space.
Exactly. So,
I think that's appropriate.
Oh, golly. Thank you. All righty. Any other comment, gentlemen? Supervisor Williams?
I move we request the tax collector to include a high-speed internet and cell coverage survey on the next property tax bill. County GIS to work with the executive office on plotting results, and the executive office considering making use of the
that's-
blank space at their discretion.
well, a second for discussion, but that
Hang
second part.
hang on, Supervisor.
Oh,
Supervisor Haschek?
I was going to second.
Now, comment, Supervisor McCowan?
thank you. And I did second for discussion.
Well, Supervisor Haschek was ahead of you on having the floor. So, go ahead.
So the comment is, I think the motion, I don't know that the executive needs to work with GIS on plotting the results, but I think somebody needs to work with the executive office to refine what goes out. And I would suggest that that be Supervisor Williams, working with the executive office to refine the language for the questionnaire.
Supervisor Williams, did you want
I
to?
would support that, and maybe we can drop the county GIS plotting the results. We can bring that back as a future item once we have the survey results available, and that'll give us time to determine cost, and it may be that the Broadband Alliance can do it at a lower cost than GIS.
Okay, we're confusing the clerk.
Can I
So let's
read
do this. Let's do this. Let's withdraw your motion. Supervisor Haschek, will you withdraw your second
Yes.
and restate your motion?
request the tax collector include a high-speed internet and cell coverage survey on the next property tax bill.
Second.
So.
Second.
Oh, Carrie Brown. Did you get that motion now that it's been amended?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to know whose name you put down for the second.
Well, generally, it's the person who says second first.
Well, maybe this time, it'd be nice.
But I don't care, but I think the motion, I would
You wait
suggest.
until you're called on.
To answer
Go
your
ahead,
question,
sir.
I put Supervisor McCowan as the second.
Okay.
We're revising the rules of procedure, apparently. But I don't care who gets credit for the second. I'm happy to defer to Supervisor Haschek. But I think it should say, and authorize Supervisor Williams to work with the executive office to refine the survey.
I accept the amendment.
Does the second?
So someone
Does
is
this-
in charge of determining what it's going to say.
Agreed.
Does the second agree to the amendment of the motion?
If I'm the second, I do.
The clerk said you were.
Oh,
You weren't listening. Any other comment? Okay, let's vote by the button.
Motion carries.